with On Point TV. I think we're live. We're live? Okay, so we're live. We are working through the Tranquil Stars Quilt, and this week we're going to work on the log cabin blocks. Now, in this particular quilt, there are two log cabin blocks. Both of them have the red side, and I'll talk to you about this little intersection here, but then there's the light color, then the green color. So here's the thing. Oops, I might want to mention, we have a new camera person. Athena took the nerve to go on vacation. So Athena is not here, so she's been really practicing with our gimbal thing that we have. So today we have Teresa on camera. Yay, everybody say yay, Teresa. So she's been practicing a little bit. It is on a gimbal, so it shouldn't be too shaky, but the up, down, and left and right, that might be a little bit off, but I'll move really, really slow, okay? All right. So we're working through Tranquil Stars. So this is the book. This is the book that my sister wrote. It is available for purchase on our website, onpoint-tv.com. Go to shop and you will see the Tranquil Stars book and the Learning to Quilt and the pin cushion and some patterns. Keep in mind you can purchase it as the printed book like this, or for $10 less, you can purchase the ebook and then you can print it out if you want to, or you could actually use it right on your tablet or computer. Totally up to you. So in the book, we're going to go to the log cabin. And here's the thing about log cabins. Most people think that they're the easiest block ever. Really, what instruction do you possibly need for a log cabin? It's strips, right? Trust me, there are ways to mess up a log cabin block, and there are ways to make a really perfectly square log cabin block. So this is the one that we're gonna work on. It is beautifully squared, but I do want to show you that this is the one that I first did. And at first glance, you might think it's right, but look, look, look. Do you see this little red guy not on the side of the red and on the green? That happens quite often. As a matter of fact, I did it twice while prepping for this. So just know it's going to happen to you too. And I know that some of you really like it when I mess up. So there you go. I messed up just for you, just to make everybody else happy. So the thing about a log cabin that is going to make it a better block is all about the way that you cut your strips. And the same thing is true for how you cut strips for the sashing in a quilt. So I probably should have pulled a quilt out for this, but a sashing is where you have a block and then you'll have maybe a 2.5, 3-inch piece of fabric that runs between the blocks in a quilt. That is called the sashing. The error is that people cut the fabric the width of the fabric instead of the length of the fabric. So I'm going to give you an example here. We're going to start with this piece.
Rebecca loves the book.
Rebecca, thank you, Rebecca. I can't wait to see what you've made. So this particular log cabin needs to be made into 1.5-inch strips. So most of the times people will, I'm sure that was good English, most of the times people will cut a 1.5-inch strip, and then from that 1.5-inch strip, I'm going to open it up a little bit. I'm going to cut through 2 layers of fabric at the same time because that's efficient. I'm going to go here to cut off my selvages. Cut off my selvage. Turn it around. And now I'm going to cut 2.5-inch strips. Now I am going to use power cutting because I believe it's faster and more accurate. And with only, you know what? And this is a 5-inch strip, just so that you'll be able to see a little bit more what I'm talking about. Let's say that we need to cut a 1.5 by 5. So I'm going to start it at 10, move it over to 5. And remember, this is cutting the width of the fabric instead of, like I'm going to teach you how to do it, the length of fabric. Now I'm going to cut another, can get 2 more out of this, 10 and 5. All right, I was able to get 8 strips that are 5 inches long, and I am left with a piece about this long. Not very useful. So now I took my fabric instead, and I'm really going to do it. I hope this isn't confusing. I'm going to do it with the 2.5-inch. No, I'm not. I'm going to do it with what we actually need so that you guys know that I'm telling you the truth. Okay, so the tan number 2. I'm going to use the tan number 2 to cut my 5.5 inch and 6.5 inch strips, okay? So instead of cutting the width of fabric, I'm going to cut the 5.5 this way, so the length of fabric, instead of just a 1.5 inch strip and then cutting that into 5.5 inch segments. Instead, cut the largest size first. So that is very true with sashings too. So oftentimes sashings need to be cut 12.5 inches by 2.5. Don't cut your strip 2.5. Cut your strip 12.5. So like I'm doing it here, but with 5.5. I'm going to cut it the length of grain. And now I'm going to do like I did before, where I'm going to open it up. Even that out just a smidge. I don't want to cheat though. I'm going to square off on the end. And now I'm going to cut the 1.5 inches. So remember, these were 1.5 by 5. So to cut with the 1.5, I'll be able to start way out here with the 12.5. And I want to show you the advantage to cutting the the wide angle first, or the wide side, the long side, and then cutting the short side. So you can see that if I continue this way, I'll get a whole bunch of 1.5 inch strips. So I'm not going to finish that. I'm just going to set that to the side and go to the other end. So here I'm coming to the other end. There's the fold of my fabric. Now I'll be able to go to 9 and continue that 1.5 inch cut. Right there. Probably should have done it all in the exact same size so that it didn't get confusing, but I think you'll get the idea. So out of this, when I cut it 5.5 first and then cut 1.5 inches, I was able to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 16 plus 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28 strips out of that. And this is all that's left over. So it's kind of hard to describe when you're only doing 1.5 inch strips, but trust me, when you're doing rectangles, sashings, pieces like this, it is always best to save fabric by cutting the length of grain. And this is the other reason that it's best, especially for sashings and log cabins. The length of grain of fabric, so going along the selvage edge of the fabric, this is the length of grain, there is little to no stretch in the fabric going length of grain. Whereas the width of the fabric has a lot of stretch. So that's really noticeable on a little strip. So this is the length of grain. It's got not very much stretch to it. This is the one that was cut the width. It's got a whole lot of stretch to it. And I promise you, I'm not pulling it just extra hard for this one, all right? So having it so that there's less stretch in the strip is going to make a world of difference when you're making quilts that have sashings, and really important when you're doing log cabins. So in the instruction writing, my sister told you to cut the wide piece first, and then from the wide piece, cut your 1.5 inch strips.
Athena said hi.
Hi, Athena's on vacation. Hope you're enjoying your vacation. Tell everybody we said hi. So I want you to know that with a log cabin block, you're going to find patterns that are going to tell you to cut the width of fabric first. Cut your 2-inch strips first, then cut your segments out of it. Think back to this moment when you learned the advantage of cutting the length of grain. So instead of cutting the 2 inches and then cutting the long, cut the long strip, the width of grain, and then subcut that into your smaller pieces. And that is how my sister asked us to do it in the book. So that's how the Tranquil Stars is written. So I do have, oh, and then one more thing, that center block. You know how there's always a center block in a log cabin? Like on this little guy? These two little pieces here, there's always the chimney and then the first log. They are always the same size. Most of the time, the instructions are going to tell you to cut those into those little squares first. So even in the Tranquil Stars book, it tells you to cut 1.5-inch squares and then go and piece those 1.5-inch squares. This is not going to save you a ton of time, but it will save you a little bit of time. Don't cut them into squares, cut them into strips. So I've got my strip of 1.5. Now I can cut them, I can find my ruler anyway, into the 1.5-inch segments. Just going to be a little bit more precise because you didn't have to try to piece those little teeny tiny squares. And it will save you just a smidge a bit of time because they're already pieced together. Okay? All right, now I'm going to take the pieces that I need to make another one of these blocks correctly, and we're going to go to the sewing machine. So let me grab.
Helen says, "Yay, Teresa."
Yay,
Thank
you're doing
you.
a fine job, Teresa.
Thanks.
So I need to grab 1, 2, then one of these. Going to make a mess here. I
Molly,
probably
you're
could have
gonna
pulled
bite
it
me.
first. Up. Yeah. I could have saved us some time and pulled it first, but no, you're having to see me do all this. Sorry. Got out of work and ran down here and got this all set up. So I think we're doing pretty good on time, honestly. So I could mention while I'm doing this that the next block for the Tranquil Stars is the Lemoyne Star. So if you've ever wondered how to make a Lemoyne Star block, I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques for doing that next week. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine. That's my traveling music in case you're ever wondering. All right. So I'm going to move this out of the way. So now this is where you're probably going to notice some difference in the camera work because Athena has a unique position that makes it perfect for this low camera work. So Teresa is going to do this. She's doing a fine job. How's it going? Let me see. I'm going to look and see how it looks. All right, so we need to tip it down a little bit more like that and then come in a little bit closer. All right, I'm hoping Athena approves. All right, so this is where we're going to start working with our log cabin. So this is my piece that I had pieced it into a strip and then cut them together. I have my guidelines for quilting on it. Remember, that is this little guy that helps me keep my seam allowance even. And here is a little bit of tip. I am using a slightly smaller than normal seam allowance, and I will explain why once we get some parts done, okay? So I'll move my needle over 1 bop more than normal on my sewing machine. And we're just going to do one, so I'm going to be pulling my leader on and off the back here. When I go all the way around the block, I will just finger press. So from here, I'm just going to finger press. You'll always be going counter. Is that counterclockwise? Right. Is that counterclockwise?
Yep.
You're always going to be working counterclockwise around the block. So that one is on. Now I'm going to take my next one, position it, and so.
Tina says, "Shot," and Simon wants to know if you need more fabric cutting it that way.
No, you don't need more fabric cutting it that way. In truth, you will actually save fabric. You will save fabric, especially when you're doing something with that's really big with sashings. Try it. Just try it. Take me at my word, okay? So here's our next piece. And I don't usually pin these at this point. I will pin as the strips get a little bit longer, but I don't normally feel it's necessary for the first 2 rounds. All right. After I've gone all the way around one time, then I'm going to press. So Teresa's going to back up a little bit. Going to bring the ironing board over. And we're going to press.
Trent asks, could you chain piece this block?
Yes, you could. And Trent, if I were doing this right now, I would have chain pieced them all together, but I didn't think that you guys wanted to see me just sew really long strips one after another. But absolutely, I would do all 12 at a time. After I get that done, then I'm going to measure it and see how it's looking. So if you can get in here really close, if I put this on the 3.5, which is the size it should be, do you see how there's just this little bit, just a hair, just on this side and a little bit up here at the top? That is the slightest little bit, but that's why I like to use a slightly smaller seam allowance so that I can trim off those little bits before I go on to my next strip. So I'll do that every round. So now we'll go back to do our next round. Now, word of warning, this is the strip that I seem to mess up the most. I know that I need to have a green strip in this case, and I'm going to piece it on the side that has just that one little square in there. I'm going to fit that right in and go. Yeah, if I were chain piecing this, it would really, the whole process for making, because you end up making 24 log cabin blocks for this particular quilt, definitely goes a lot faster. All right, just finger press that, and then counterclockwise going around. So there's my longer green strip. That means another long green strip goes on top of it. Oh my goodness, I'm almost out of bobbin. We'll be okay though. All right. Doesn't it always happen? How many of you have been, you're sewing, you've just got one more seam to go, and sure enough, you're running out of bobbin. All right.
Do you want a super bob?
Nope, I'm good. I'm good. So here's the thing. Sometimes when I'm using the little bit of a smaller seam allowance, the strip will be a little bit short of where it needs to be. Can you see that? Even on the other end, it's a little bit short. So what I do is I center it up. So I'm going to center it just a smidge small there and a smidge small there.
I can call to a bobbin chicken.
Bobbin chicken. I tell you, the bobbins. And you know what's cool? This particular sewing machine, this is my brand new Pfaff Icon. It has a lot bigger than normal bobbin. So it really does not run out that often. And just, you know, to talk about the wonders of the Pfaff Icon, I can actually wind a bobbin while I'm sewing if I want to. Ooh, I'll show you that someday. All right. So now I'm going to put this in here, and again, I'm going to center it up. So it might be a smidge smaller than the actual piece that's pieced because I'm using this little bit of a smaller seam allowance. And now we're going to go back to the ironing board. Backing up, backing up. Teresa's a dancing. Oh, I like set my iron right on the floor, so just sure to trip you up on that one.
Yes.
Sorry. Careful. Okay, it's coming along. Scooch this little guy in so we can see how we're working. So again, I'm going to measure him. Now it should measure 5.5 inches. And even with my smidge smaller seam allowance, I'm running a little bit shy. So you know what I'm going to do? So I'm going to show you the truth of the matter here. Right here. And it might be because I'm working a little bit fast. I've got this on 5.5 down here. I'm a little bit short, about 1/8 of an inch short there, but I'm pretty much even Steven here. I am going to make my seam allowance smaller. So I'm going to adjust it. Even at this point in the race, I'm going to adjust it. So now we're at about 5.5. Okay, careful of the cord. Okay. And we're going back to work. So here is our next green strip. So again, it's this little, the one that's a little longer, but it's lined up with the little one, that little single one. And right about now is when I'll start using some pins. So I'll put a pin here and then come over here and put a pin here. Oh, I am going to make my seam allowance 1 bob smaller. Oops, wait a minute, gotta go the other way. There, okay. All right. I do like with these pins in the seam guide, do you see how the pin, the ball head floats over here on the side of the seam guide so that I can, whoa, go right over top of that pin? Yeah, I'm okay with that. All my years as a seamstress, I went right over top of pins an awful lot, and you know, nobody ever came back to haunt me for it. So actually, my sister Rene was a better seamstress than I could ever be, and I'm pretty sure she ran over pins too. So, okay. Finger press that. Ready for our next one. And I think this will be the last round I'll go, even though it won't be completely done, but I think at that point you'll get the idea. But I want to show you this one little thing about the next strip. There we go. So this is why I like this seam guide better than some of the other ones that are out there that are too thick, because the thicker ones you can't use pins. There is the feet that have the little guard on the side that are a 1/4 inch feet. I don't really care for that either. The pins can go under it. You kind of give the pin a little push and it'll go under, but I still am just not a fan of those ones with the little guard. I have become obsessed with these guideline for quilting ones, and they are not paying me a thing. So if you happen to know who they are, tell them I'm out here, okay? All right, oops, but it's getting stuck there. Okay, so this time I'm going to put on a piece that I cut that I want to point out a little something. This piece was cut out of a plaid stripe. Because I cut it on the length of the grain, do you see how perfect those lines are? Check it out. I mean, that one there, that little tan guy is the same distance all the way across that strip. That can only happen when you cut your fabric the length of grain. I did a video on cutting borders that have plaids on them. That's on our YouTube channel also. And that is the most amazing thing. So cutting a plaid so that it goes perfectly straight is done because you're using the length of grain. So for a quilt like this, where it's just got these little strips, I would not have used that plaid if I did not think that I could get that stripe to run so perfectly straight. It would have been way too noticeable that the lines were going not straight if I had cut that the width of fabric. So just one more to do on here and then we're going to press her up, okay? Whoops. And look at even the sewing. Look at how that's the tan strip. Do you see how far it is all the way across on that seam line? Just fabulous. That's the advantage to working cutting plaids the length of grain instead of the width. Also, as you notice when I'm piecing, my fabrics aren't shifting. And when you're doing a log cabin and you cut your fabrics the width instead of the length, your fabrics are going to walk forward on you because they're kind of stretchy. But when you do a log cabin with the fabrics cut the length of grain, the block is just going to come out square. That's all there is to it. All right, so that's the last one we're going to do.
Somebody wants to see your seam guide again.
Oh, my seam guide? There they are. Guidelines for quilting.com. Honest to Pete, you should be able to go to your favorite quilt shop and say, hey, can you get me these? Because I know for a fact that they can get you those. I know where they can get them. So if they're thinking they don't know where they can get them, tell them to call me. I can find out. quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. Okay. All right. So we're just going to do this last one. For this block, I would be going around one more. But I think that that's all we're going to have to do for this for you to see how nice it's turning out. And then I would measure it one more time. And I would do the trimming just like before. So now I did 7.5. Ah, this is much better. When I took that seam allowance and made it just a little bit scanter, and then I would go through and I would just trim off that littlest, tiniest bit. You know, it's funny about log cabins. They always seem to get pregnant on the edges. They get a little bit wider, and so if you don't trim them as you're going, you will find that your blocks get more and more pregnant. So there you go. That is how not to make pregnant log cabin blocks. Everybody needed to know that. That's just the way I feel about it. So I hope that you enjoyed that. Just a little quickie on doing log cabin blocks. It will make all of your log cabins more precise when you cut the length of grain, the long strips, the length of grain first, and then subcut into your segments. Next week, we're going to work on a Lemoyne Star. I'm going to show you a method using a couple of other rulers, and then I'm going to show you my favorite traditional method with a da-da-da-da-da-da-da set in seam.
Talk
And
about
I
the pin
promise.
cushion.
Oh, the pin cushion. Oh,
Deborah asked about the pin cushion.
that's my pin cushion. It is available on our website, onpoint-tv.com. You can purchase the pattern that comes with the magic plastic, and you can purchase the kits. I've got either the herringbone, a purple, or a red. So if you're particular about what color you want, be sure you let me know before I mail it out to you. I think that is all. If you have any questions about this or anything else, be sure that you either email me at quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. Please leave a comment under these YouTube channels. We really like that. And I just found out today that YouTube likes us better if you actually like more of the videos. So if you like the video, please just click that little thumbs up. If you don't like it, please stop watching now. All right? So have a great day. We'll see you next week.